Hi everyone, this is Natasha again of Chikaboo Designs. I'm the creator of FML Comics, and this is part 2 of a video tutorial series I'm doing on how I digitize my comics. So in part 1 I looked at the scanning process, and in this part, number 2, I'm going to look at using Photoshop to prepare the scan for publishing on my website. The next part will be about uploading to Instagram, so stay tuned to that. But for now, here we go. So you'll see on the right hand side here on my desktop, we've got spiralofdoom.tiff. That's the file we scanned in the previous video tutorial. So I'm going to right click it and open with Photoshop CC. Just so we have the same tools available to us, I'm going to ask you to go to Window, Workspace, and Essentials, and hopefully that means you'll see the same things everywhere that I'm seeing. Now the first thing I want to say is my goals with putting this comic into Photoshop. I want to make the blacks blacker. I want to make the colors pop so they're a bit more eye-catching. And I also want to fix any mistakes I might have made while drawing during the inking process, or any pencil marks that might not have been erased, and just clean it up a bit. I want it to definitely look hand-drawn, but I want it to look how I want hand-drawn to look, if that makes any sense. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to create a background layer so that I can move things around and there'll still be a background. So I'm going to hit layer up here at the top, new layer, and I'm going to call it background. Okay, so that background layer is now on top of my comic, layer 0. In fact, I'm going to call this comic just so we are all on the same page. Just double click and comic. And I'm going to click and drag my comic so that it's above the background. And now I want to fill the background with white. Right now, if I hide this layer, so if I click on this eye icon, I can hide the comic layer. I'm seeing this checkered background, which means transparent, so that's nothing. So what I want to do, I want to just put this, it doesn't matter. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill this, so edit and fill with white. Let's keep it at that, white. Okay, and now my comic is on top, so I'm going to make sure that I'm on the move tool, and this means that if I click my comic layer and I move it around, I've still got a nice white background. Okay, so I'm just going to undo that. I did a step backward, and actually I don't really like how close this signature is to the edge, so I'm going to nudge the comic a bit this way. Now you can see this black line appearing. That's probably from the scan, but I'm going to show you how to fix that immediately actually. So my second task is to fix anything that I don't like in the comic. So erase any lines that I don't want to appear in the final version. So I'm going to head over to the eraser tool. That's this one. That's a good size circle, but just so you know, this is where you can adjust the size up at the top left. So I can make it massive, or I can make it small. So I'm just going to put it back approximately to where it was. That was a good size. And I'm going to click and drag and there you go, that's gone now. Now I'm going to zoom in to my comic and see if there's anything I want to erase that I don't like. So let's go to this zoom tool And I'm going to click. Now, I don't particularly like these marks that have gone into my speech bubbles. It's not the end of the world, but I'm going to show you with the eraser tool, I can just get rid of them. So that's way too big because it's going to rub out the word as well. So I'm going to make my eraser tool really small. It's just 11 pixels. And now I can sort of delicately just get rid of them. And this is why it's good to have a white background, because otherwise I'd just be seeing transparent holes. Let's get rid of these two. And this, okay. Don't like this line. Just going to scroll up. Is there anything else that needs desperate attention? I'm not mad about this K situation, so I'm just going to rub that out. Everything else. Oh, there's a little dot here. I don't like it. Going to rub it out. Everything else looks okay. Maybe there's swirls here. A bit annoying. Just going to get rid of them. Oh, if I make a mistake like that, I can just edit, step backward, do it again. I have a bamboo Wacom tablet and I often use it for these kind of jobs. It's just a bit easier than using a mouse. But I don't know that everyone has that. So I'm just doing this with a Bluetooth mouse, actually, not my trackpad, but you can do it with anything really. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. Oh, maybe there's these 3 bits over here. Yeah, I think that looks good to me. So the next thing I'm going to do is I want to make the blacks blacker. Now, I've created my own process for this. I'm sure there's many different ways you could do it. I'm going to show you what I do. So I've just gone back, I just went back to the move tool. That's the best tool to be on, because otherwise you're doing all kinds of random stuff. The move tool means you can just move around the layer that you've selected. I'm just going to undo that though. So now I'm going to duplicate my comic layer. So I'm going to right click and duplicate layer. So I've got comic copy. And I'm going to make the blacks blacker on this layer. So the tool that I use is called the levels tool. So I'm going to go image, adjustments, and levels. So now this panel has appeared, and this slider on the left makes the blacks blacker. Can you see that happening? The blacks getting blacker. And this one on the right makes the whites whiter. So actually, if you have some small pencil marks, often you don't have to rub them out individually. You can just make the whites whiter and they'll disappear. That's not always the case, but it is for this comic at least. So I'm gonna hit OK on that. I quite like how it's looking. Okay. And I'm also going to zoom out just to get a better view. So the minus icon, and then I'm going to click. And I just want to show you something, or tell you something. If you hit Command 0, probably Control 0 on a Windows machine, you'll see what happens. Yeah, it makes your workspace exactly the size of the screen. So okay, I'm having a look at this and I like what's happened. And I'm working on another layer, so just for your info, if I hide this layer, I can see the difference. I quite like that difference. So now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to select the black parts of this layer and delete the rest. I'm going to get this is called the magic wand tool. By the way, if you can't see a tool, if it's not selected, the one that I'm mentioning, you can hold down and you'll see some other tools. Or you can right click, I think, yeah. So if you can't see a tool that I'm talking about, just hold down and see if it's there in the same place that I'm clicking. Okay, so I'm going to click the magic wand tool, and the magic wand tool selects all areas that have the same color that I click on. So if I click on white, it's going to select everything in that layer that's white. If I click on green, it's going to try and select everything that it believes to be green. So that's kind of weird that it's selected so much, because there's only green here, here, and here. But I'll tell you why it's done that. It's because you set the tolerance up here. So I'm going to just zoom in for a sec. So if I click this, okay, I'm going to deselect for a second. So I'm going to go select, deselect. Okay, if I click here, the tolerance up here, the larger the number, the more greens it's going to pick up around the whole image. So if I change this to 1 now, and I hit green, it's going to pick things that are exactly the same color. If I change it to 30, it's going to pick up things that are broadly the same color. So the tolerance affects how much, what do you call it? How much it stays close to the thing that you've selected. I haven't phrased that very well, but I think you get the gist. So I'm going to put it to 50 for the time being. I think that's a good mid number. And I'm going to select this black. So that looks quite good. It's selected quite a lot of the black and not too much of anything else. Looks good to me. So now what I'm going to do is I want to delete everything that's not black in this layer so that I just have a layer of blacks. So I'm going to go to select and I'm going to hit inverse. So now it's going to select everything that's not selected right now. And now I'm just going to click delete on my keyboard. So I'm going to hit delete. I'm going to go select, deselect, so we can have a look at what's happening here. So now I'm just to show you what's happened, I'm going to hide the original comic layer. And here you can see what's happened. I've just selected the blacks from the copied comic layer. And what that means for me, in this comic it's maybe not as obvious to see, but it means that I can edit the colors of my comic, these greens and greys, independently of the blacks. And sometimes that's really useful for me. So, for example, if I click on this layer now, I could, just to give you an example, this is called an adjustment layer. I'm going to hit hue saturation, for example. And just to show you, I'm going to drag it out here so that we can drag it up here and open it. Yeah. So I've this is an adjustment layer, which means it appears in the layers panel and it's always editable. So rather than if I hit image adjustment here, which applies your adjustment permanently to the layer, this adjustment layer, it's just in your layers panel. You can delete it, you can edit it at any time. So it's a bit more flexible that way. But just to show you what I could do now is I could just completely change the color of the colors without changing the blacks. And I like having that flexibility. So I actually don't usually use the hue saturation, so I'm just going to click on this bit and then bin it. Here's where I'm going to bin this layer. But I'm actually going to use the levels again, but I like that I can keep editing it, and I'm going to make it bin. darker like this, and a bit brighter. So I'm going to hit Command 0 again so it zooms out to see the whole comic. Quite like how that looks. And just, I'm going to go to the layers panel and I'm just give you an idea of what that levels has done. Hide it. So it's not affecting the blacks, or it's only affecting the blacks that are in the, that are kind of actually grey in this spiral of doom. But yeah, I'm editing the colors independently of the blacks. So that's, for me, my comic done. I like the result and I'm happy with it. I'm ready to save it. So the next step for me is to make the size right for the web. So I'm going to go to image and image size. Now here we're back to some things that look more like the scanning panel. The main thing that I want to do is I want to change the resolution to 150 because that's what you need for the web. You don't need 300. 300 is good. At this point, I could save this for professional printing. But right now, I'm going to change the resolution to 150 because I just want to publish it on the internet. And I'm going to keep the width at 900 pixels. That suits my website dimensions. I would say that's a decent size for a good quality comic on the internet. But maybe depending on the size and scale of your website, if it's in an, yeah, if you're going to have a full width comic on your website, you might want to keep it at 1400. You can basically, since we're moving the resolution from 300 to 150, you can basically go double the size that it originally was with no problem. But anyway, I'm sticking to 900 pixels for a portrait comic, and that's fine with me. I'm going to hit OK. It's reduced in size. Now I want to save it as a JPEG for the internet. So File, Export, Export as. PNG is not good for this much complexity. JPEG. This is going to be the file size. To be honest, it's not amazing for internet images, but I live with it. And I do actually have another program that minimizes JPEG images, but to be honest, 500 kilobytes is not the end of the world. So JPEG, all of this is fine because we've already done it. Export all. I'm going to save it to the desktop again. Spiralofdoom.jpg is fine. And save. I'm also going to save this as a PSD Photoshop file so I can come back to it if I want. So over here, the format is going to be Photoshop. Okay. And now I'm going to quit Photoshop. And here are my three files. Spiralofdoom.jpg, ready to go on my website. Spiralofdoom.psd, ready to edit again. And spiralofdoom.tiff, the original scan, that I can then manipulate again if I need to. And just to show you what my website looks like. So this is how I've prepared all the comics that you can see here. Same process. I know it might not be the sexiest process, it might not even be the most efficient, but it works for me and I'm stuck in my ways now. So the method I've developed for digitizing my comics works specifically for what I've created. It also it works for how much time I want to spend on the process and what equipment I have available to me. Over the years, I've talk to different comic artists who do things in vastly different ways, but I'm happy with the process I've developed, and I want to share my process with you, but I hope that you will be inspired to find your own process. And whatever you come up with is right. So just find what works for you, and hopefully these 3 videos will help you gain some confidence or gain some tips in how to do that.